3. Clean up chaos as a wreckage closes North Coast beaches. The federal government on the hunt for welfare cheats, refusing to pay their debts. A nightmare over, filmmaker James Ricketson just hours away from being in Australia after he was pardoned in Cambodia. And could a shoulder charge cost Billy Slater his final 80 minutes in the NRL?
This is NBN News with Jane Goldsmith.
Good evening. Beachgoers in northern New South Wales were shocked to find one of the most popular coastlines closed today, with large dangerous pieces of debris floating in the water. Ballina Shire Council spent most of the day removing 9 tonnes of hazardous material after a boat capsized overnight.
A sailor's belongings that should be floating above the surface instead washing ashore. A Brisbane family had made the 3-hour-long journey only to arrive to a closed coast.
They had like a big tractor and it was like picking up the big pieces, and it was like all along the beach and there were cars everywhere, yeah.
The soggy debris was formerly a timber cruiser that capsized around 10:30 last night.
2 adult males on board. They suffered some form of mechanical problem. They broke down. The boat was dragged up on the north wall.
The 2 men were rescued by police, but their boat couldn't be saved. Water slowly swallowed the vessel, only to resurface piece by piece.
The facts of how the boat came to break down and who was actually driving remain to be seen, but we'll establish those and with the assistance of the police.
It took a small army to remove the 9 tonnes of rubbish, including fuel tanks and gas bottles. And as the saying goes, one person's trash is another's treasure.
Just a bit of surfing and grabbing a bit of stuff that's worth anything.
The state's Road and Maritime Service will assess the Ballina-Richmond River again before nightfall, but is warning boaties to operate with caution in the coming days.
For the next few days in particular, navigate with caution, particularly fishermen heading out just before dark.
Georgia Anderson, NBN News.
Welfare cheats are being put on notice with a major shake-up of the government's debt recovery system. Up to 150,000 Australians will now face travel bans if they refuse to pay up. In the shade and throwing light on welfare and tax cheats, today Michael Keenan announced a crackdown.
We don't believe it's appropriate for people to be able to go on holidays when they owe the Australian taxpayer money.
The Human Services Minister reaffirming the government's stance to those planning to dodge their debts.
We're serious when people owe us debts in making sure that they pay that money back.
Those who ignore the warnings and refuse payment plans will be slapped with an international travel ban. 20 have already been issued since June, and that number is set to rise as the government looks to recoup more than $800 million in unpaid funds. That's the amount owed by more than 150,000 Australians who are no longer on the welfare system, but are instead headed here and airports across the country. 2 New South Wales residents and a Victorian have already had their wings clipped. And while the government looks to crack down on welfare, the opposition is looking for ways to look after the welfare of Australians. Labor pledging a further 6 subsidised MRI licences, 2 for New South Wales and Queensland, and 1 for the Monash Children's Hospital in Victoria.
The Abbott-Turnbull-Morrison government has a woeful record when it comes to MRI licences.
Early Walsh, NBN News. More details have emerged about a high-speed crash on the Pacific Highway at Charlestown near Newcastle early yesterday morning. Police say the 24-year-old Taree man driving the vehicle was disqualified until 2020 and may have run a red light moments before losing control. He's now in a stable condition at John Hunter Hospital, having fractured his neck. A 32-year-old Gateshead woman who was a passenger in the vehicle remains in an induced coma. There's been an extraordinary reprieve for an Australian filmmaker jailed in Cambodia for spying. James Ricketson has walked free, granted a royal pardon just 3 weeks into a 6-year sentence, and his family says they're over the moon.
For 16 months, James Ricketson has been living a nightmare.
All I've ever done is try to help poor Cambodia. 400 days in prison for no reason.
espionage after he was arrested and charged. His crime, flying a drone without permission over a political rally organised by the Cambodian opposition party. But Ricketson had also been critical of the country's long-standing Prime Minister, Hun Sen. For more than a year, he sat in a squalid prison. Then, 3 weeks ago, he was sentenced to 6 years for spying, although the court couldn't say who he ever spied for. The 69-year-old has been making documentaries in Cambodia for 20 years. Always protested his innocence.
I'm hoping that the judges will discover the truth and set me free today, yes.
In the end, his freedom was as sudden as his arrest. This royal pardon signed on behalf of Cambodia's king.
I'm just grateful that, justice has prevailed and he's come home and he is an innocent man.
Ricketson was released immediately. His lawyer says he'll be heading home to Australia as soon as the paperwork is signed.
Everybody said, what are you going to do when you see him, Rox? I'm going to tear up his passport. No, I'm going to hug him, of course.
Stockton Childcare Centre today celebrated a small victory, opening its eagerly anticipated new play area. But the celebrations were bittersweet, with staff aware the centre will almost certainly have to relocate again as the erosion crisis worsens.
Young and carefree, these kids are blissfully unaware that moving their playground away from the crumbling coastline is only a temporary solution.
About buying us time.
Relocating the outdoor area took months and cost more than $45,000. The change was forced upon the childcare centre, powerful swell undermining the previous playground, as well as unearthing a toxic dump and several sunken ships nearby.
It's been an interesting 9 months since our journey with erosion started in Stockton. For the staff, it's been a really tough time for them, and I'm so proud of the work that they've done in maintaining a quality program for our children.
Although the state government has pledged money to help experts develop a long-term plan to fix the erosion problem, the beachside complex itself appears doomed. Newcastle Council is currently refusing to renew the lease when it expires mid-2020 unless a solution is found soon.
We're going to be looking for other opportunities and locations to potentially redevelop in Stockton. They'll be definitely away from coastal erosion predictions that Council provided.
Sandberg Bree, NBN News.
Lake Macquarie was flying its eco-warrior flag high today as tens of thousands of people gathered at this year's Living Smart Festival. From yoga to food waste, clothing swaps and beehives, it's a community pushing a sustainable living agenda. From the big picture to planting ideas, the Living Smart Festival in Lake Macquarie had everyone thinking today.
We know how important it is that we need to reduce our footprint, and this is all about us being more responsible.
Close to 30,000 people came to learn how to grow, eat and live more sustainably. Whether it was reducing emissions and food waste or cultivating your own garden and cooking it up, there was something for everyone to learn. The biggest crowd was pulled by War on Waste mastermind Craig Newcastle.
It's great to have festivals like this because people get to engage with new ideas and find out new things they can do. And look, this is a great area, Lake Macquarie, because you've actually got food recycling, which is hopefully something the rest of the country is going to follow.
We have a contamination rate of less than 1%. Now that's amazing. That tells me that the Lake Macquarie residents are really big on recycling. They know how important it is.
There was plenty for the young scholar too, with stories passed down from our first people and getting acquainted with some natives, while this boy learned just how much energy it takes to power up.
I want to teach people about energy efficiency. So we've got three different lights. We've got LEDs, the halogens, and we've got the old filaments lights, and people pedal the bike.
We're from Upcycle Newcastle, and we're making our Circle of Waste rug, which is made out of hundreds of old t-shirts.
A growing community which doesn't want to mug the environment. Georgia Marr, NBN News. Researchers from the University of Newcastle have released a new book chronicling the history of the Hunter Valley wine growing region dating back to the early 1800s. Hunter Wine, a history, took 4 years to write, with the authors relying on access to public and private archives to trace 6 generations of producers.
It's a story that lots of people think they know,
and that lots of people love because people love drinking wine. But really what we saw as we began to research the story was that there were patches of misunderstanding and gaps in the story.
An exhibition that runs alongside the book launch is open at the Newcastle Museum until February 3. Coming up later in sport with Sam Jordan, we'll have all the highlights from the Jets' pre-season friendly with Edgeworth. But after the break, is this the final resting place of the HMS Endeavour?
Hipsters. Jack, you're even smarter with your money now.
Handcraft.
So take out APIA home insurance plus car insurance and you'll get 10% off both. It's time to switch to APIA.
You need to get out more. Barbecues Galore sale on now with kettle barbies from $99. Hurry, limited time only.